Hello, friends. Welcome to the Thinning of the Veil podcast special edition. This is Tia Smith, your host, and thank you for letting me pop in another day this week. It's not going to be very long, but I felt like I needed to address something that new that was happening on my channel because I've heard both publicly and privately about people aren't sure why it's happening and what it's all about. And my promise has always been in the very beginning to be real and honest and open in how I'm feeling and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So I'm going to start with the story and kind of go the long way around, knowing that we're going to arrive at the end place, the whole reason for doing this. So many of you have noticed that there are ads on my YouTube channel. Now, to some, that is not a big deal. To some, it is a really big deal. And depending on who you ask, it's either way. But what I wanted to do was to come on and explain why it is the way that it is and how I arrived at that decision. Because I don't take that decision lightly. Believe me, I sat on it for a couple weeks before allowing it. Just FYI, I have blocked all not good advertisements, I hope. I'm just learning all of this, but that's my intention. But what I wanted to do was go back to April of this year, like clear back, so far back in this year of April. My husband and I knew that we were coming to the end of our YSA adventure, I would call it. We had 4 callings in the YSA, and my husband was a high councilman over the 26th ward. So when you're a high councilman in a YSA ward, you are highly involved in all the activities and everything that's going on. So we were involved with that. He was also the high councilman in the stake over Temple and Family History, and I was the Temple and Family History consultant. So we were in charge of making sure that all of the Temple and Family History callings and activities and doctrines were, getting disseminated throughout the stake. And that was a pretty busy calling. I was also asked to run the family history library in that particular stake. And then eventually I was asked to teach institute. So you can imagine how busy our lives were. It took up all of our extra time and then some. And so we were sad to get released, but we were also exhausted on the same side of that. And so we just knew that it was coming to an end because we were coming to the end of the 3 years. And it was an interesting time. And I was reflecting on what to do next. And as all empty nesters probably have, maybe if you haven't reached that point yet, and if you already are, then this doesn't apply to you. But I have been a stay-at-home mom my whole mother life. And then we got called into the YSA calling. So it's just been so busy, 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 busy. So my natural flow was to go to the Lord and say, okay, so what do you want me to do next? Because my husband and I have always, well, not always, but have tried really, really, really hard to put what we want to the side and ask the Lord if there was something particular that he wanted us to do. And in my mind, it was making sense that, okay, I'm not in the YSA anymore and I'm an empty nester. Maybe I should look at getting a job. And the reason why, and this is the personal part of this message that I'm sending out today on this lovely Thursday, was that I have cystic fibrosis. Now, if you don't know what that is, don't feel bad. I actually didn't know what that was either. Apparently, usually people find out when they're babies, and I found this out in 2015 when I was 45. 2018. So I was 45 at the time. I am now 51, which is atypical generally for cystic patients. And I'm just going to read directly from the Johns Hopkins site. about what cystic fibrosis is so that you can, and I'm not going to go over the whole detail about how I found out. There was several thinning of the veil experiences that happened with that, and I will detail that in a later podcast. But I wanted to get this out there now so you can kind of understand long way around why there's Google ads on my YouTube channel. It's an interesting way of doing it, but that's just, I felt like I needed to. So this is what it says. Cystic fibrosis, or CF, is an inherited life-limiting disease that affects many organs. It causes changes in the electrolyte transport system. People with CF have problems with the glands that make sweat and mucus. CF makes mucus thicker. Symptoms start in childhood. On average, people with CF live into their mid to late 30s, but new treatments are increasing life expectancy. So if you do the math, I am over the expiration date for most cystic patients. Now, if you go back to October 2023 General Conference, Elder Sabin gave a talk, and it was about happiness. And in that talk, he included some examples from his children. His boy was struggling to, he was at a Boy Scout thing, and he was trying to work on an arrow, and he was worried about it because his son was so small because he had CF. Then he also referenced his daughter who had a double lung transplant, because a lot of CF patients are in that category. I seem to be atypical in all of the things. My mutations are pretty rare. I am pretty much the only one in my family that, cousins and everything, with the exception that I do have a cousin who has two daughters with CF. One passed away some years ago, a little over 2 years ago, or maybe a little under 2 years, but it's right around there. And she was 19, and then she's got another daughter right now with it as well. But other than that, I so far, no one in my family seemed to be an anomaly. And so it's been this interesting journey. I also am highly susceptible to pneumonia, which, according to my CF doctor, is also atypical in her experience. So I have this double whammy of cystic fibrosis and a susceptibility to pneumonia. So you can imagine with this particular disease, that it is it is a daily thing that you have to do, daily medicines that you have to take. There's things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis to keep yourself healthy. And because of treatments and new drugs that have been coming out, the life expectancy is, moving into the late 30s, and now it's moving up. It used to be in the early teens. And so those medical care, the costs are quite costly. Medicine alone is upwards of $30,000 a month for the medicine that it takes to keep me alive. That doesn't include the medical care, the hospitalizations, the tests, the doctor visits. Depending on the year, it can average $50,000 a month, especially that month that I ended up in ICU in Hawaii because of my pneumonia and septic shock. You can imagine the cost that it took for an air ambulance ride from Kauai to Oahu. It was astronomically expensive. And so we've got all these medical bills, right, that we're paying for. And we live simply. We don't have a lot of things. We don't have toys. We don't go on trips or anything. I have noticed one of the reasons might be because I seem to get sick every time I go on vacation. So, maybe it's not so bad, but things in our life have been abnormal, to say the least. And so we have all of these other mortal things that we have to worry about, right? We have to worry about the medical bills and all of the things that go with it. Now, Darren is super duper amazing. He works 2 jobs to support our family. And he has always said, I will carry that because I want you to do whatever the Lord tells you to do, you do it. And I will make sure I do my part so that the work of the Lord may move forward. So he has gone a lot. He works a lot. Um, so you can see when I got to that point in April and May where I was trying to decide, okay, obviously, duh, I think now is the time for me to um, start helping financially, to the family. So again, I made it a matter of prayer and fasting. We are hyper aware and sensitive to that because we always want to be doing what the Lord wants us to do because we have covenanted that that is what we shall do and that's what we want to do. And there's sacrifice and consecration and all of those things that go into it. So I wanted to remind you, and this is from the first podcast episode that I did, and thankfully I'm getting way better than that first episode. They say practice makes perfect, and I'm slowly getting there. But I wanted to read the revelation that I received after praying and asking the Lord what we should do next. He said, I need your voice to testify of the gathering. I have blessed you with the gift of teaching that you may help to change the world on both sides of the veil. Technology has been given that boundaries are not an issue for receiving testimony on the other side of the globe. If you will serve me with all your heart, might, and mind, I will provide the means that you and your family need. I will help you and strengthen and lengthen out your days, my daughter. So in that revelation, he addressed several things. He let me know that going to work was not the right thing to do for me. He wanted me to consecrate my time and sacrifice in creating this space where the testimony of the gathering could be echoing. And when he said global, I was like, you're crazy. And the only way I knew how to do that was to start a podcast, which I didn't know just because of the technology, but I didn't know how to do any of that. Now, when you start a podcast, unless you have started one, you have to understand that there are investments that you have to make in the front end for all of the equipment, for the services, that you have to apply to that let your podcast go out. You've got to, get all this stuff done, and it takes time, effort, and money to make the podcast happen. And when I told Darren about my revelation, he says, all right, well, then that's what we're going to do. And he got to work in trying to figure out the right kind of equipment and all of the things that go with that. And I was just kind of dragging my feet. And Darren was like, the Lord has commanded you to do something. I will help you on my end, get your stuff done. And then it's up to you. And so it has been a financial commitment to start the podcast, which didn't make sense because of all of the other, medical bills and everything else that happens in life. But we did it, and we move forward with faith because we know and understand that to have more faith, you have to do something that requires more faith. This podcast has taken faith on both of our efforts to make this happen. Every month that costs money for this podcast to go out, it is definitely a consecration of time for sure, because the hour that you listen to or watch is days for me and trying to get it prepared and ready. The interesting thing as we were moving forward in this faith and putting some of our finances towards trying to make this podcast happen as the Lord had commanded, going up and down with my health and everything else, trying to get it all to work. But the Lord had already addressed that he will provide the means that we need, and he will help me in my health and strengthen and lengthen out my days, which he already has. I'm already, like I said, I'm already past the expiration date. And when you understand that the Lord is literally keeping you from day to day, you are hyper focused on keeping your covenants and knowing that the Lord is has saved you for a reason, and you don't want to let the Lord down in his keeping you alive. It is interesting. I kind of feel like Elder Holland, when you have been saved and you've gone through a health crisis and it wasn't your time to go, you feel distinctly in debt to God, and you feel a need to testify even more because you realize that at any point in time, it could be over. And it's that way for every single one of us, but especially with me and my disease. And it's ever present in my life. I have to do things every day to keep me alive. So I can't ever forget about it. Literally in my phone, there's a reminder that goes off, you know, 2, 3 times a day, take your pills, like do it's just this ever present thing. So when we started this podcast and we invested our time and money and our faith into doing what the Lord has asked us to do, we were going along, and then in November of this year, we got an interesting letter, and it was devastating to me at the time. And to help pay for, you can imagine, all of the medical bills, there are grants given to help pay for these things. Well, I got a notice in November that a grant was being I wasn't going to be eligible for it anymore, just because they were going to focus on Medicare Part B patients. And that's not me. And so I'm literally panicking, and I'm saying to Darren, what are we going to do? And he's like, and again, he is so much better at this faith thing than I am. He's like, it's not my problem. The Lord said he's going to take care of us, and he's going to take care of us. And I just hold on to I hold on to his faith, because sometimes my faith spirals just a little bit. And it's sad for me to say that, but but this is, I guess, how I learn with the Lord. And so we move forward with this monthly financial obligation, and our initial investment or an obligation into doing this podcast, all with a sacrificial, consecrated heart. It is important to me to keep those covenants that I have covenanted to, not only because, well, for the biggest reason is because I want the Lord to know that I love him. And I am grateful for his presence in my life and for his miracles in my life and keeping me alive so many different times, for his thinning of the veil experiences, for the things that he's taught me. And so I consecrated, especially in that YSA situation, hours and hours and hours of testifying to them about the gathering, about the importance of the thinning of the veil. I taught an institute. I consecrated my time there. I taught institute along with paid institute teachers. So just like those paid institute teachers, though, they consecrate in other ways. I am now in the young women's in my ward. And it's so the circle continues to happen, right? So I guess in the end, I'm asking you to just be patient with the ads for right now. The hope is that it can just help us with just the cost of the podcast existing from month to month. I'm not sure, friends, what this is going to look like. What I do know is that the Lord has promised to keep up his end of the bargain if I do what he's asked me to do. And I know that he will carry me through both financial, physically, and spiritually. And again, I don't completely know what that's going to look like. So I hope that as you're commenting and listening and trying to understand where I'm coming from, know that my heart is um, just to do the work of the Lord, because he's literally sustaining me from day to day. Even today, I went in and had another diagnostic exam, and I'm on pins and needles waiting to see what that diagnosis is going to be. And hopefully it's nothing. And if it's something, then we'll have to address that. But I just felt like I needed to share where I was coming from, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and maybe at the end of the day, just be patient with the ads. Just know that they're there for a reason. And I mean, this is just me. I don't have a producer. I don't have a sponsor. I don't like, there's nothing. And so I guess there's not nothing. God is in charge. He is my light, my life, and He is lighting the way even when things seem impossible. And my faith in Him is growing. My friend group is growing. Thank you for your love and support and your prayers. I know there's a lot of people that pray for me all the time. And I'm sorry that I have to be that person that is always needing prayers. But I have a testimony of the power of prayer on both sides of the veil. I believe there are, as the Lord has told me, millions of people praying for me on the other side of the veil. To help me keep this podcast going so that I may be in some small way uh, an instrument in His hands, that others may have a desire to go to the temple, to do family history work, to save their ancestors. And in the process of all of that, of having a thinning of the veil experience with the Lord, for they truly are special and remarkable. So thank you for being patient with me today and allowing me to be just a little bit more um, open about who I am and where I'm coming from and what I am currently facing. And like a lot of you, we are all just facing these things together. Know that you're not alone. Know that I understand not feeling good, that I understand the overwhelmingness of medical diagnoses and doctors and medicines and percentages of life expectancy, all of those things. I get it. And I am sorry, but I can testify that the Savior is aware and that He loves you. And that if He asks you to do something, you do it in faith and He will make you equal to the task. So thank you for allowing me to just give a little bit of an insight into who I am. And hopefully that helps you understand going forward some of the decisions that might be being made. And again, um, just thank you for tuning in and being supportive. So we'll see you Tuesday when we talk about glory, this 3 degrees. In reality, I'm probably just only going to talk about the celestial glory. I really am not going to light on the other two very much because I just want to focus on the celestial glory part of it. So thank you again for joining me. Please keep sharing this with others. And it is working. It's across the world, it's across the globe. And I am truly, truly humbled. We'll see ya. Bye.